Hey, it's Christopher Cardinal, and you're listening to the super fantastic thinking above average. I think it's above average. Racing spectacular. Hey, welcome. This is episode number 2 of our program. I hope you enjoyed the bonus material that came your way this week as I went back into the way back and I covered the 1999 Exide Battery Select 400 that went down on September 11th, 1999 at Richmond International Raceway. So this week, we have a lot of meat on the bone. We have a lot of topics to cover here. Are you fired up? I'm fired up, man. I'm fired up for the playoffs to begin. 16 drivers, 10 races, 1 championship. It's coming at you starting this week in Las Vegas on Sunday, followed by Richmond, which generally, for quite a number of years, was the final race before the 10 race cutoff for the championship. Now it's actually in the playoffs. And the great unknown, the Roval Charlotte Motor Speedway road course racing in September in the playoffs. You got it. You have it coming your way. It is coming. That will be the third race in 2 weeks for the playoffs. The third race that would be a cutoff elimination race, and we'll trim the field from 16 to the round of 12, then to the round of 8, and then you have your final 4. So just before we get into this week's episode, as I said, there is a lot of meat on the bone. We are going to be going long form on all things playoffs. Going to do a quick dust up of the Brickyard as it was delayed by a day due to weather. And we're also going to look at some of the popular news items that were in the media this week. And also going to touch on a little bit of IndyCar, as one of the all-time greats will cement himself into the record books. All-time wins leader Scott Dixon. We'll have just a quick recap of just how incredible the feat he's about to accomplish. Should he accomplish it? Let's not put the cart before the horse. But he is looking like he will capture his 5th IndyCar title on Sunday at the season finale at Sonoma. First, just going to correct some snafus from the bonus episode, as I referred to when I was speaking of Cal Wells. Their greatest accomplishment was Ricky Rudd's win at Darlington. It's actually Ricky Craven. So have mercy on me. Both Rickies, Rudd and Craven, did drive the Tide car at one point, but Rudd never drove for Cal Wells as they took over the sponsorship. They would be the predecessor of the Tide ride just a year later, but Ricky Rudd never raced for Cal Wells. And with Johnny Benson Jr., I said his rookie year was in 97. It's actually 96. However, I was accurate that he did finish 11th in the points in 97 before moving on to Roush in 1998. I felt really bad about this was that I talked about Tommy Morgan. I was naming the crew chief, and also another snafu I had with Johnny Benson Jr. It was Bobby Leslie that was his crew chief, not Ben Leslie, although he also did crew chief for Roush Racing, but he did not have a crew chief for Benson under his tenure. Tommy Morgan, I felt really bad that I didn't know who he was. I just said Tommy Morgan, the name, and honestly, when I followed this sport for 20 plus years, I never really came across the name Tommy Morgan. In any case, Tommy Morgan actually was an extremely successful crew chief in the Xfinity Series. He won 13 races in that series from 95 to 09, 2 with Steve Grissom, and 11 with Jeff Burton. So he was a mainstay on the Xfinity Tour with Roush, and had a great success with Jeff Burton when Jeff Burton was driving the 9 car in that series. So Tommy Morgan, that's who he was. That's why he was crew chiefing for Benson. He just didn't come out of thin air. He was already into the system at Roush Fenway, then known as Roush Racing. So those are just some of the snafus from that episode I want to correct. And I think I corrected this one mid-sentence. I referred to State Farm Corn Dogs, which was the sponsor of Todd Bodine's car in the event that I covered. I referred to a State Fair. It was actually State Farm. It is actually State Fair Corn Dogs, and I was over like Rover in that race. So the 25th edition of the Brickyard 400 in Indianapolis went down on Monday, day late, on September the 10th. Brad Keselowski, how about Brad? We talked about it the first episode, just finding consistency when he needs to find it, getting red hot. Wins consecutive races for the first time since 2016. He wins another crowning achievement in his career. He wins the Southern 500 the week before, backs it up with the Brickyard. 26th career win, ties him for 30th, puts him 30th on the all-time wins list, now tied with Dale Jr. and Fred Lorenzen. And this is the first victory for Penske, Roger Penske, the team owner, at Indianapolis in NASCAR. And as we alluded to in the first episode, he's the first owner to win the Brickyard and the Indy 500 in the same year. Ganassi did that with Dario Franchitti and Jimmy McMurray in 2010. This year, Will Power wins the Indy 500, and Keselowski takes home the checkers at the Brickyard. So he's the second team owner. And then, I said, they're the two owners that have done this. Their roots are highly embedded in IndyCar racing as well as NASCAR. Only led 9 laps. So Keselowski seems to had been finding himself in the right place at the right time 2 consecutive weeks. So on the surface, looks like they are red hot, and they have improved. Penske, the consistency hasn't really been there as it was in previous seasons. They haven't run as strong as I think they'd like to have run. So he only leads 9 laps of this race, takes the lead from Denny Hamlin. They trade back and forth toward the closing laps of this race, but on the final lap, with a tight battle with Eric Jones and Hamlin, he takes the lead and wins the race. Now, it's just, to me, this is a monumental shift for Penske. They are in a position going into this playoff, especially with Keselowski, where you remain quiet all year, and now you're making noise when it really counts. Again, if you're going to armchair quarterback this and do hypotheticals, you're going to look at it. First thing that it's going to point out to you is that he didn't lead a lot of laps in these races that he's won. It doesn't really matter, I guess. The most important lap you lead is the final lap. However, he's in the right place, right time, and he could do that in the playoffs. Once the playoffs starts, I think we'll talk about where I think he's going to finish later. He's going to have a long playoff run. If he continues to come up in the clutch and be in the right place at the right time, he's going to extend his run in the playoffs past the first couple rounds, guaranteed. Hamlin, disappointing for him. We'll talk about him later. Eric Jones could have done a lot for his career had he won a race this magnitude in only his second full-time season on the tour. Jamie McMurray, we'll get it out of the way now. We're going to talk a lot about him this episode too. However, and I talked about, I'm not gonna get hot about this week. I got hot 2 episodes already about online comments and armchair quarterbacking and those who have all the answers. I saw a comment in Racing Reference in the comments page for the Brickyard 400 for this edition. That McMurray should have been more aggressive on that final restart where he had an opportunity to battle for the lead or even take the lead. I don't even know who the user is, and I'm not going to give that person any kind of credence by even referencing them, but it was something along the lines of McMurray's more concerned about racing clean and being Mr. Nice Guy as opposed to saving his career. Well, why would you want to win under those circumstances is what I would say. Why would you want to wreck other drivers and take perfectly good race cars, put them in the fence, grab the checkers. I know it's checkers or wreckers, that whole proverb, that old adage that you're there. And I know they're there to win. They're competitors. I know they're there to win a race. There's nothing wrong with winning with dignity and honor. So, McMurray, you done well. So, as I said, Keselowski is, I think, making a great case to go down in history as the greatest driver to ever race for Team Penske in NASCAR. Look at the things he's done. He's brought this organization, the Brickyard win, which Roger Penske, the team owner, Indianapolis is near and dear to his heart. You know that by hearing interviews and the success he's attained in IndyCar and open wheel ranks. This is a monumental win for him. Keselowski brings him the Brickyard Trophy, the first championship for the team in Xfinity in 2010, and in 2012 the Cup title. Only left for Crown. They call these races the Crown Jewel races. So these are the elite. The elite win these events. You have the Brickyard, the Southern 500, Daytona 500, Coke 600. Some NASCAR enthusiasts will argue that the way the rules have changed and the shift in competition and the metamorphosis that the series has gone through, that these Crown Jewel races don't mean anything anymore. That they're kind of seeing their place in the sun, different place, different time. They're not holding in high regard as they once were. Keselowski's got 2 of those in 2 weeks. Now you'd be just missing the 500, which he's won at Daytona and Charlotte, but at the event of the fall and the Coke Zero 400 in July at Daytona. Dazzling resume. He's just adding to this. And this was the first win for Ford at Indianapolis since Dale Jarrett did it in 99. And here's a nice stat for you all, for all the stat hounds out there. Dale Jarrett, when he won the race, he won the title that year. I'm just saying. I'm not saying I'm picking Keselowski to win the title off 2 weeks of tremendous luck and, well, not just luck, but hard work and effort, but right place, right time, takes the checkers. I'm saying Keselowski's going to win the title, but as I will show you here now, as I was doing my research, 9 times in NASCAR history, the eventual series champion won the Brickyard in the same year. Kyle Busch, Jimmy Johnson's done it, Bobby Labonte, Dale Jarrett, Tony Stewart, Jeff Gordon. Elite company, if I do say so myself. This is, again, building on Keselowski's case, not only be the all-time greatest driver to ever put on the fire suit and get behind the wheel for Penske, but for Hall of Fame, also to start looking at Keselowski as a potential future Hall of Famer. Kyle Busch, going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer one day. Johnson, Labonte, he's on the ballot. I just don't know in the end of it all if he gets in or not. I really can't say at this juncture. I'm going to say he gets in, but I also wouldn't be shocked if he didn't. He has the one title to his credit, but was a fairly consistent driver for many years in the circuit in the late 90s into the early 2000s. Dale Jarrett, Hall of Famer. Tony Stewart is going to be a first-time ballot Hall of Famer. And Jeff Gordon, who goes into the Hall in 2019. Pretty elite company to be in. And Keselowski's done this really just a handful of years with Penske. As I know he did drive for them for almost nearly coming close to a decade. However, the first year or so he was there was highly forgettable. Looked as if he would fall through the cracks and just be another driver with potential to have an opportunity to race for one of the elites and never really amount to much. So you're going to make the comparison. Is he the all-time greatest Penske driver? I looked at the stat sheet this week, really analyzed him and Wallace, put them neck and neck. So Brad Kay has been with Penske since 2010. And in that time, he's racked up 25 wins, 97 top 5 finishes, 157 top 10s, 4 poles, the one championship in 2012. Where Wallace from 91 to 05, 37 wins. It's not a real, the margin, the gap isn't too large there. But here's where Brad K is going to have to do some catching up on Rusty. 143 top 5s, 244 top 10s, 27 poles, and the highest that Rusty would ever reach in the standings driving for Penske was in 93. And, you know, Rusty is a Hall of Famer. If you're going with the wins, Keselowski ain't far behind. And in a much shorter time frame than Wallace. However, it's going to take a few more years for Brad K to attain the top 5s, to reach, to match them, or even to exceed those top 5s or top 10 finishes. In any case, right now, I'd say he'd be, no argument, the second best driver to ever race for Penske, Team Penske, and Wallace would still be atop that list. And I think will still be atop that list for quite a number of years. Eric Jones. Since Pocono in July, 4 top 5 finishes in the last 6 races, the most of any of the JGR cars in that time frame. As you have Kyle Busch, the mighty Kyle Busch is only a 3, Daniel Suarez 2, and Denny Hamlin 1. So if you're looking at the stat sheet and analyzing the stat sheet vigorously, Jones is at this time the most consistent driver out of the stable. He's peaking at the right time. Second at Indy. This is a great confidence for him, boost for him as he goes into his first ever playoff appearance. That he had an opportunity to win the Brickyard, won Daytona. So we'll talk about Eric Jones and his opportunity in the playoffs later, where I think he'll finish. In any case, really great to see this young driver having a golden opportunity to make the most of a situation that he earned rather quickly in his career. And I think he's going to be okay. And it all comes down to it. He's going to be just fine. A letdown for Denny Hamlin. And Denny Hamlin's had a mediocre year. Uncharacteristically not putting up the stats that you're accustomed to seeing from Denny Hamlin. He finishes third here at the Brickyard. This is his best finish in Charlotte in May. It ties his best finish for the season at third at Charlotte. He was fourth at Daytona and in Richmond in the spring, and then Charlotte in May, and then now here at Indianapolis. Just a disappointing season, I think, for Denny, as you see Kyle Busch continue his phenomenal run up the history books. Daniel Suarez has looked consistent at times. Has looked like, to me, Daniel Suarez, which we're going to talk a little bit about him again, as you know what is going on with Joe Gibbs Racing potentially hiring Truex Jr. to fill the seat of the 19 car. I think Suarez is, in pockets of the season, has looked just as good as any of the Gibbs drivers. This ties his best finish, Denny Hamlin, at Indianapolis for third. He'd done that 3 times. He did it in 08, 14, and here in 18. Leads 37 laps. He tied with Clint Bowyer for the most on the day of the lead, share of the lead. Just again, couldn't quite capitalize on an opportunity. This would have, I think, put him in a good position going into the playoff, as he finds himself now at the bottom half of the seeding, and I'm not sure if it's going to get much better for Mr. Hamlin in the next 10 races. Bowyer leads 37, finishes 5th. First top 5 since his 5th place at Chicago in July. So as you talk a lot about Stewart-Haas and how great they've done this season and continue to put themselves in the conversation interchangeably with Joe Gibbs of who's the best team in the sport. Bowyer's gone quiet. I know he got the 2 wins. His numbers have improved greatly from a year ago. Seems to have found a home here at Stewart-Haas. But as you have Kurt Busch and Harvick have been very consistent and almost flawless all summer long. You have Bowyer, who's kind of slipped. think the playoff is going to is going to really be the barometer for this team, and I think what they're going to do in the next 10 races is going to pave the way for how 19 is going to shake out for Clint Bowyer and in the 14 car. Truex Jr. It seems to just be coming undone down the stretch. As the announcement was made, as I said, the team will cease operation at the end of 2018. Last place finish here at Indianapolis. I don't know if this team is just losing focus, bad luck, but whatever have be the case, but they are crumbling as of late. This is the second finish of 30th or worse in the last 3 races. I don't know if Truex's mind is focused on next season. As I said, he's indicated he wants to finish his career with Furniture Racing on a high note. They're focused on winning the title, competing for the title. However, it just seems that the timing, it's quite timely that he's struggling as he is. This is the most Truex has struggled in about 3 years. And it all seems to center around the announcement that this team is not going to be around much longer. I don't know. I'm not reading into it. The mark of a true champion. He's going to rise. He's going to rise up from this. I just can't see it really hampering the rest of the season for them. I just don't think this is going to hinder his championship hopes. However, it is a major distraction to deal with on a weekly basis when you're trying to remain focused and compete at a high level, knowing this team isn't going to be around much longer. 10 more races. So we'll switch our focus now to some silly season items that were in the news this week. Jamie McMurray officially announced will not be driver of the 1 car in 2019. Rumor and innuendo has it Chip Ganassi, that is pronouns, offered him a Daytona 500 position to race one of the cars in the 500 for him. And once he would be done, that would transition into a similar role that Dario Franchitti has with the team. So it seems as if Ganassi is forcing Jamie Mack into retirement. He thinks the world of him. You know that. You see it in their interaction. This is his second stint he's had with the team. McMurray's driven for only one other team in his Cup career. And the loyalty. This is where it's going to come in. McMurray's indicated already that he wants to continue. That was what he indicated months ago when big names were starting to announce their departure from the sport. As Elliott Sadler, Casey Kane, McMurray has indicated he'd like to continue, and it just doesn't look as if it's going to be with Chip Ganassi. And Dario Franchitti's role with Ganassi was primarily on the fact that he took so many vicious hits towards the end of his career that he was pretty well forced into that role. I'm not sure if that's something where you can contrast the two. I don't think Franchitti at the time, had he hadn't had such issues or ran into such difficult circumstances with injuries, that he would be in the same role he's in now with Ganassi. He could potentially still be driving. And he's one of the all-time greats in the IndyCar series. So this will put McMurray, he's quite uncertain of his plans, I think, at this time, if he's going to accept this role with Ganassi or seek employment elsewhere. Former champion Kurt Busch, who it seems like each and every year we're talking about his contract status with Stuart Haas. This is the 3rd consecutive year where is he going to return? Is he not going to return? And that's all relying heavily on his loyalty to sponsor Monster Energy, who would likely follow Busch to Ganassi should he actually accept this opportunity and drive number one car for 2019. As I alluded to, McMurray has driven for Ganassi on two separate occasions in his career. From 03 to 05, he would drive for them in the Texaco Haviland car, the 42. He won his first career race in Cup, substituting for Sterling Marlin in the fall of 2002, as he would win in his second career start at Charlotte. That is a quite epic scene. If you haven't seen it, go out of your way to watch the YouTube video. I think you'd find it out there. Just the elation and jubilation around the team that, rallying around Sterling Marlin, who I thought was likely on his way to the championship in 2002. And for McMurray to sort of come out of nowhere and just fill that void and, build the team's morale by getting himself in the winner's circle that day. That was quite the epic event. He would return to Ganassi in 2010, then known as Earnhardt Ganassi, as there was an alliance between DEI, which was on their dying days, life support, linked up with Ganassi, who was transitioning his team, and they would win the 500. His first race back with Ganassi, they win the 2010 Daytona 500. And he returned home, as I said, following a disastrous tenure with Roush Fenway Racing from 06 to 09. Had only manufactured 2 victories, and they were both restrictor plate races, oddly enough. Daytona in July of 27. I don't know if it was known as the Coke 600 back then. It could have been still the Pepsi 400. And then in Talladega, he would win in the playoffs in the fall of 09, as you know that he wouldn't be there much longer. The second tenure, I think, with Ganassi, I think it was more successful than the first, I would say. I think that's a fair assessment. He'd have score 4 wins, the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard, 2 crowning achievements, 2 crown jewel races. He does it in the same year. He would also back that up with the win at Charlotte in the fall of 2010. He's not won since 2013, and I think that's what's really handicapping McMurray at this time. Is he'll be 43 years old in 2019. Is he slowing down? Is age catching up with him? Or is it just the equipment? Is he not in a good position to compete for victories? I'm not sure. He's made 3 playoff appearances from 2015 to 17. Won the All-Star race in 2014 and the 24 Hours of Daytona in 2015. So they've accomplished a lot together in the second tenure. So from 2010 to this year, they have nothing to hang their heads about. They've done phenomenal and have raced really well. And it just... this one is another one, much to most people surprised. I don't understand this one. I think you'd let McMurray continue. I know performance has to be there. You haven't won since 13. There comes a time when in this sport you're only as good as your last win. Is there any more wins in McMurray? Those are questions that remain to be seen. And I don't know if he is removed from this ride, if he decides not to take the role of Ganassi and seeks employment elsewhere. I'm not really sure if Kurt Busch, who's not a young individual himself, if this really makes a lot of sense for Chip Ganassi, that you're going to swap out a veteran driver for another veteran. It's not as if there's a prospect in Ganassi's organization that is being promoted to the Cup Series. You're basically swapping him for a veteran who, and it's not to disparage McMurray. Let's look at the stat sheet. Kurt Busch has done a lot more in his career than McMurray. He's a champion in this sport. He's had greater success. He has more victories than McMurray. He brings that winning culture, that's Busch, pronouns pal, to Ganassi, an organization who has really had a difficult season, a difficult couple of seasons. The expectations of Kyle Larson that he was going to compete for the championship. Not only last year, he had a disappointing playoff appearance. This year, he's going into this frustrated. He has not found the winner's circle this year. He could be in line for a short playoff run. It just comes to a point where if you're not seeing the results on the track, that's when you have to analyze the whole organization and start thinking about how can we make this better? How can we get our performance to a Stuart Haas or Joe Gibbs? How do you get to that next level? It's unfortunate for McMurray. It seems like his career is on the decline. And once that starts to become obvious, I'm not sure how you recover from that. Possible opportunities for him could be Levine Family Racing. If they have a technical alliance with Joe Gibbs, this could be a great opportunity for McMurray to salvage his career and continue on. But look what Casey Kane did. He was good enough for 27th in the points as we stand here. As Kane is still going to be out of the car for several more races. And Casey Kane, I would even go on to say, has had a better career in Cup than McMurray. And he's accomplished very little with Levine Family Racing. What makes anyone think that McMurray could go in there and be an impact player and difference maker there? And again, this is not to disparage Jamie McMurray. He's won the Daytona 500, the Brickyard. He's come up really clutch when he's needed to. He's won some big races in his career. RCR, is that even a place you want to go? That could be a possibility should Ryan Newman not return. GMS Racing, the team that's done so well, the standouts in Xfinity and the Truck Series have expressed interest in moving their operation to Cup. And they were even at one point in the running, as it was in rumor and innuendo, to buy out Furniture Row. Could that be a possibility? Could Front Row Racing be a possibility, as their driver lineups never seem to be set in stone at any time? JTG Doherty, do they make a change, or does McMurray get a chance to swap with Busch and take over the 41 at Stuart Haas? And as you know, they have Cole Custer in their organization, who I think is not Cup ready. And if he has a couple more seasons in the Xfinity Series, competes for the championship, does he step aside when Custer's Cup ready? McMurray could have an opportunity to run well with Stuart Haas in a short time frame. Let's say if he plans on calling it a career in the next year or two, could this be a suitable home for him to call it a career? So many things to consider if you're Jimmy McMurray. However, I believe, my gut tells me that he's going to continue his career. It's just not going to be with the one car. And we all know that as official now, that he will not be with Ganassi past 2018. Another news item that I thought was interesting. It happened just around the time of Darlington, but I didn't really touch on it in the first episode. We'll visit it now. Matthew DiBenedetto announced he'd be leaving the 32 Go Fast team prior to Richmond. I think that was something that, not Richmond, Darlington. We're going to Richmond next week. He's a popular driver, known as the people's champ in the sport, as you know. Maybe paying homage there to The Rock. He's over like Rover. DiBenedetto has gotten himself over to social media accounts, his contagious personality. This is a young driver who he'll be 27 in 2019. Lots of racing left. Is this a guy that one of the big teams, like Stuart Haas comes to mind, and I think he could be a fit there, and I'll tell you why momentarily. It's risky, as DiBenedetto said, leaving this team. It is a bold move. But he's alluded that to himself. He called this risky, but I think he said it's completely necessary, especially with what's up with what other people are doing, and they've done similar things. And he's referencing some of his peers, like Alex Bowman, who started his Cup career with BK, and Tommy Baldwin, and looked to be again another great talent gone to waste just to race the Cup Series and not exercising patience and spending a couple years in Xfinity or the trucks to build yourself. Ryan Preece, same idea. He's won some races for Joe Gibson Xfinity Series. Ross Chastain now, as we see, running an underfunded team for several years in the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, had an opportunity and is going to race some races for Chip Ganassi for the remainder of the season. Is DiBenedetto get this opportunity, much like his peers? Because we don't know what he's done yet. I know it's his stat sheet is not dazzling by any means, but he's never really had an opportunity to pretty much, how'd you say this? To really spread his wings, to really give it all he has, because he's never had a golden opportunity. So we don't know how good he is or what he can actually do in a car given the right opportunity. So he's running some Cup, as I said, full time for BK in 15 and 16 before transitioning to Go Fast in 17 and 18. He would finish 6th at Bristol in the spring, and that would be his first career top 10, and that'd be the highest finish for BK Racing, as they that there are legal issues and they're no longer around. 4 career top 10 finishes, coming restrictor plates, and one was at Indy last year for Go Fast. That was as I said, the carnage that was at Indianapolis last year. You could put an asterisk that he was, again, right place, right time. Car really wasn't all that good. He's a former Xfinity Series castaway from Joe Gibbs. He ran a handful of Xfinity races for them in 09 and 10. So he has had an opportunity to race for a big name team, just not at the Cup level. I'll tell you why Stewart-Haas Racing will make sense, that he could potentially wind up there should Tony Stewart take a chance on him, give this young gun an opportunity to see what he's made of. I'm all for it. Stewart-Haas, as great as they are, has one of the oldest rosters in the sport. Harvick in 2019 will be 43. Clint Boyer will be 40. Eric Almirola 35. Where's the youth movement? Wouldn't you like to have a younger driver in the stable that you can build around once Harvick steps away, once Boyer steps away? Almirola will probably go a few more years than Boyer and Harvick. Matthew DiBenedetto would be a tremendous fit at Stewart-Haas. He'd have an opportunity to come into a winning organization who builds their culture around winning, giving him that golden opportunity he's been seeking, patiently waiting for at the Cup level. I really think, because Cole Custer, he'd be the natural fit for this car. He would think naturally this is who's going to take Stewart-Haas Racing into the next decade, as he is a top prospect. He's just not Cup ready. I don't think he's in line for a Cup car ride yet. He's 5th in the standings, Cole Custer. He has one Xfinity win in 2017. He was 5th in the standings in 2017. This year he is 2nd in the point standings. I just don't know if he gets that opportunity to move up just yet. As we're talking about here, here's a prime example. For instance, give him an opportunity to flourish in the Xfinity Series, then transition to the Cup Series after a couple more campaigns in the Xfinity Series, where he has an opportunity to win races and run for championships. I think that where DiBenedetto could capitalize and have an opportunity to run for Shiraz. But that being said, how many other great drivers out there? What sets DiBenedetto apart from a Landon Castle, Randy LaJoie, Corey LaJoie, Gray Galding, drivers who seem to have thrust into situations in the Cup Series rather quickly without any kind of safety net. And you look at that's not to disparage BK Racing or Go Fast Racing. Their resources are just not where some of the larger teams are, and competing with those teams on a weekly basis, it's not realistic. It's not a realistic goal. And the same could be said. I said it. If we have Landon Castle, I know was a castaway from Hendrick. What really killed Landon Castle, who I think is a tremendous talent. I'm a huge Landon Castle mark, and Greg Galding. I think two of the finest young drivers in the business. It's just circumstances beyond their control where Castle, who was Hendrick going to replace him with? Replace for Castle? Jeff Gordon at the time? Jimmy Johnson? Absolutely not. It's just different place, different time. Landon Castle could have wound up behind the wheel of a Hendrick car. We'll never know. A little follow-up on Daniel Suarez, as he indicated at Indianapolis, as he was in the spotlight, given the rumor and innuendo that's been tailing him since the announcement of Furniture Row's demise. He said there's nothing in place. He's signed nothing for next season. He remains confident, however, that he will find an opportunity in the Cup Series to continue, even if it's not with Joe Gibbs. Continues to be linked to the Levine family racing team, as Joe Gibbs will likely enter a technical alliance with them. However, it was pointed out in an article that Suarez maybe doesn't want to go there. As we've seen when it happened to Casey Kane. It seemed to have just done nothing for Casey Kane this year. A driver of his caliber has really not made any noise with that team. And for Suarez, a driver still getting acquainted to the series and finding his footing, would going to a team like Levine Family Racing, albeit with a technical alliance with current employer Joe Gibbs, that hinders his career, does it not? I think Suarez has tremendous upside. It's just a matter of giving him a quality ride to continue his career with. This seems to be the final straw for him and Gibbs. This seems like this is his exile, as Gibbs. I can't see if Denny Hamlin or Eric Jones isn't going anywhere near as Kyle Busch, but Denny Hamlin, let's just say hypothetically, we'll just play the what if machine. We'll just jump in the what if machine here and go with the hypotheticals. If Denny Hamlin were to move on, I can't see Gibbs going back to rehire Suarez years later, as he has a group of young talent in his pool that could move up to Cup in the near future. And Christopher Bell, who's running extremely well in the Xfinity Series, is a likely candidate to move up to the Cup Series, as would be some of Kyle Busch Motorsports' young talents, Noah Gragson, Todd Gilliland, and Harrison Burton. They could all be in the future plans of a Joe Gibbs Racing in a handful of years. Suarez would be an afterthought at that time, unfortunately. And it's just the way the business is. You move on, and it's unfortunate that Daniel Suarez may find himself in a position to where his progress is halted. And not to any of his own doing. It's just the way the world turns, I guess. So Scott Dixon, we're going to switch our gears here to IndyCar. Scott Dixon, a four-time IndyCar champion, is closing in on championship number 5. He's the 03, 08, 13, and 15 champion. In a really good position going into the season finale at Sonoma. As you know, he's first time in the all-time wins list. tremendous career, 16 years, 264 races, 43 wins, 101 podium finishes. And he's just 21 markers ahead of Alexander Rossi. So by no means has he won this championship just yet. It could go right down to the final laps of the season. As you saw a few years back when he won this championship, you had Juan Montoya, who looked to be in the driver's seat and on his way to the championship, lose the title in the final race at Sonoma. So nothing's ever set in stone until the checker flag waves. However, knowing Scott Dixon, how tenacious he is, seemed primed and focused, as you see on his social media accounts. He has himself a date with destiny, and I think he's going to capture his 5th title on Sunday. That would put him in some elite company in pro sports, as Tom Brady in the NFL, the New England Patriots, has 5 titles. Derek Jeter, longtime Yankee great, 5 titles. Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer star, 5 titles. And Kobe Bryant, the Lakers, 5 championships to their name. That is some pretty impressive company to be in, to have your name in the record books with. So Scott Dixon, I hope he can pull this off. I'm a huge Scott Dixon mark, and I absolutely admire him. And I think him and Chip Ganassi will go down as one of the great driver-owner combos in all of, not just IndyCar, but all of motorsports combined. So I'll be rooting for him to pull it off and win his 5th championship come Sunday afternoon at Sonoma. So now we're going to focus gears here. I'm not going to actually tell you who I think is going to win Vegas. We're going to just run through the top 30. So the drivers who unfortunately didn't make the cut, couldn't find their way into the playoffs. What's next for them? Where do they go from here? Let's have a look. And then we're going to go into the playoff contenders. I'm going to give you who I think, where they finish, and what's next for them. Ryan Newman, the Rocket Man. Worst season statistically since 2008. Then he had an average finish of 20.3. He had 1 win, 2 top 5s, 8 top 10s. At this point, he's in his 5th season with RCR. He was 2nd in the standings in 14, had an average finish of 12.7, was really 1 lap away, was he not, from potentially passing Kevin Harvick and winning the championship? What an unlikely champion. And we talk about unlikely champions in sports a lot. Wouldn't Newman have been an unlikely champion at that time, considering the circumstances that these drivers at the time, when he seemed to be had linked to Harvick throughout that season, as they essentially swapped rides as he took over for Newman and Newman took over his position at RCR. I think what's really killed Ryan Newman's career, if you looked at, he's regressed. He's really lost that consistency that was once a benchmark for him. His average finishes in 15, 13.5, 16, 15.7, 17, 15.8, 18, 18.3, and this season he has no wins. He's only had 1 win since the 2013 season. Bouncing back from that, he had the 1 win last season, and it wasn't a fuel mileage gamble at Phoenix, so I'll remember that. That's how he put himself in the playoffs last year. And another stat that is startling, he has no top 5s this season. His team has just not had any luck. There are 7 top 10s to their credit. The best finish of 6th at Loudon in July. 17th in the standings. It just seems that they've lost that consistency where at one point when he was at Stewart-Haas, he won a race from at least 1 season from 2010 to 13. And only 1 win in the last 5 years, and albeit, like I said, on that fuel mileage gamble at Phoenix last year. He'll turn 41 in 2019. Is rumored to be in the final year of his contract again with RCR. And it seems like this is something that Newman goes through every season. Is he going to remain with RCR? His future always seems to be up in the air. He's now linked to the 6 car, which was vacated officially this week, as its press release came out that Trevor Bayne will not be in the 6 car past the season. Newman's name has emerged as the favorite. However, it all depends on Caterpillar, who's leaning towards the sponsor, longtime NASCAR sponsor, is leaning towards remaining with Newman and 31. Albeit they only would probably sponsor 25% of the races, they made it known that they want Newman as their driver if they're going to continue with RCR. Could that sponsorship pick up and move to Roush Fenway? They have sponsorship in place from another organization. With that conflict, could they split the sponsorship? Could that be an opportunity Newman really explores, is going to Roush Fenway? I think on the surface, it prolongs his career. I'm not sure if this signing is an impact signing. I mean, it seems like both the 6-car and Newman are better days are behind them. However, it prolongs the career. It keeps him relevant. Who knows what they could turn around and shock everyone. And Newman's been known to, when you think you've written him off, he doesn't go down. Can't keep a good man down, I guess, as Alabama said. Newman, I think the biggest thing for Newman next year is to stay put. I think the biggest positive step he can take would be to stay put, remain with RCR. Eventually, and at some point, Ty Dillon will probably take over the 31, as he'll join his brother in the family organization. But I think you can still get a couple quality years out of Newman. This season could be just the write-off for whatever reason. RCR cars have not been fast, let's be honest. They're really trailing. I just don't think this is the end for Newman. And going to Roush Fenway Racing, I don't think is a horrible move either. I think this could send a jolt up their competitive scale and give them an opportunity to turn their organization around. 'Cause I think that's a team that is in dire need of positives, as is RCR. So Newman, I think the verdict on Newman is he will continue his career in 2019, albeit somewhere, and potentially not even with either one of these two teams that I've just alluded to. But I think you will see him in a car in 2019. So Paul Menard, his 5th at Michigan in June. It was his best finish of 2018. He won a pole this year. This is his first year with the Wood Brothers, as he brought in some of the sponsorship from family-owned business Menards, and has a technical alliance with Team Penske. This has been a good move for Menard. I think he's improved this season over what he's done with RCR, although he had, again, not dazzling numbers when he was with RCR, but respectable numbers. It kept him relevant, kept him in the sport. I think going into next year, we're going to see much of the same from this team. They're going to hover around that cutoff, that bubble where the chase, but the playoffs, they're going to just hover around that bubble. Are they going to get in? Are they not going to get in? I think that's Paul Menard's career, is it not? That he's one of those drivers that is always going to be flirting with either making the playoffs or sitting out. And I think much of the same in 2019, and just another year of experience with the team, maybe building some chemistry for the future for Paul Menard and the Wood Brothers. So Ricky Stenhouse, my heart sank for him at Indy. He's just felt like a rock this year. Is this a hangover from the breakout season in 2017 where he had 2 wins, playoff appearance? He just couldn't capitalize at Indianapolis. He ran up front for a bit. He was running well enough, I think, I don't think he was ever going to win the race, but he was putting himself in a position, had cautions come out, what have you, pit strategy, could have put himself in line. He was in an all or nothing situation. They knew that going in. This team was only, I think, out of all the drivers who were just on the bubble, who could have upstaged Bowman or Johnson, I think he was the only realistic threat to actually make it in, where the others, I just feel like that there was no as I said, the broadcasters, the media has to sell this that everybody's got a fighting chance, and they do. Circumstances could alter a race, or anyone can win. Any of the 39, 40 cars that are in the field. But I just thought that Stenhouse had the best opportunity of those drivers on the outside looking in. This whole Roush organization, it seemed like they are suffering from that hangover from a year ago. Just when it looked like they were on the right track, they were getting back into. I don't think they're ever going to be an elite team again in NASCAR, Roush Fenway. I think that ship has sailed for them. However, this organization just fell like a rock in 2018. So I think for 19, it's how do you recover from this? And Stenhouse has sponsorship in place for the next several years. There's no uncertainty in this team. They know where they're going to be. They know who they're driving for. Focus on improving this program. And Stenhouse is a tremendous talent, I think, that given the right opportunity could repeat championship glory that he enjoyed in the Xfinity Series. It just no top 5 finishes no top 10 finishes since Charlotte in May, and no top 5 since Talladega in the spring. And I said they have sponsorship in place. It's a critical year for them in 2019. They have to progress. They were making slow progress, albeit it's progress last season. It just amazes me that they just couldn't quite capitalize on that forward progress from a year ago, making the playoffs, winning 2 races, to this year just really looking like an afterthought. And that's a really unfair thing to say about a driver of the caliber of a Stenhouse Jr., because I think Stenhouse Jr. is a fantastic talent that belongs in this series and can do wonderful things if he's focused and the team rallies behind him. Excuse me. Now into Daniel Suarez. We all know his story. Futures in debt with JGR. Seems to be confident that he's going to find himself a suitable ride in 2019. Tremendous upside to him. I think we have not seen the best of Daniel Suarez just yet. He was really rushed into his current deal with JGR as Carl Edwards unexpectedly faded away after 2016. Time's not really on his side at this point, as he just seems to be in a precarious position this late in the season. He's at a second place from the pole at Pocono. I was mighty impressed with Suarez's appearance. That's what Suarez's performance that day. I thought had a tremendous opportunity to win that race, given a few more laps. Who knows? We could be talking about him and in the playoffs solidly, and maybe Truex Jr. doesn't take his seat. Who knows? And at pockets of time during the year, Suarez has looked like the best driver out of the Joe Gibbs Racing stable. I just don't think 2 years on the job is a large enough sample size to determine whether or not he continues in Cup or takes a step back and goes back to if he goes back to the Xfinity Series, runs for another team, or even runs for Joe Gibbs. Is that a step backwards? You could see it that way. However, it's just, in the end, it's all about building and making the most of your opportunities. And I think that the upside for Daniel Suarez is just, we haven't seen the best of him yet, and hopefully he gets to continue his career somewhere next year, even if it's Levine Family Racing or whomever. I'm a huge Daniel Suarez mark. Jamie McMurray, we talked about him. He's on the back end of his career. No win since 2013. He's on the hot seat and the rumor mill pretty much all year long that he would not be returning to this team. So I think it came to no one's surprise that he's gone. It seems to be they're building this team Ganassi around Kyle Larson. He's the cornerstone of Ganassi Racing. It's made it known, as I said when we talked about McMurray in the program today, that he intends to keep his career alive, wants to race somewhere, even if he's on the decline or his career is on life support. And you're not going to tell any driver that. I think you're not going to tell a driver that this is the end. You may see it as the stat sheet doesn't lie. You may see those stats. They're not dazzling by any means, but deep down in his heart, I think he knows he still can compete. And I think that's what's going to drive him to continue his career as he has, I still think, one good race in him, one good win in him. Should he accept the position with Ganassi as an ambassador or as a development coach, whatever the case may be for younger talent, I think it all is just to build around Kyle Larson and to make Kyle Larson the centerpiece, which he already, I think, is fair to say, in a few short years that he's been in the Cup Series, has already taken on that role. And I think it's just the further development of Kyle Larson is what's the primary objective for Ganassi moving forward. So William Byron, at this point, I think if the season we're in today, would squeak out the Rookie of the Year honors in 2018. His best finish was 6th at Pocono in July. For Mr. Byron, I think he's the lone driver left out of the Hendrick playoff party. Not to worry. Could be there next year. Not making any early predictions, but I think he could be there next year. Basically, what all it boils down to when it comes down to it for Mr. Byron is more seat time. Developing his Cup credentials. They use these next 10 races as a sample to put himself in prime position for 19, get that much needed seat time, focus on winning the Rookie of the Year title, and just learn from those who are in the playoffs, his 3 teammates. It would be in his best interest to keep a watchful eye on their playoff progression and see what he has to do next year differently so he has an opportunity to be a part of that playoff picture next season. However, I think his primary focus should be trying to close out the Rookie of the Year title in 18, and for 19, get as much seat time in the car. As I said, these next 10 races, learn from some of the mistakes, and he's been involved in a lot of accidents this year. He's wrecked the car a fair bit this year. That's just part of the growing pains. That's part of the process. I think that Byron knew coming into this deal with Hendrick, when you're coming in really with just 1 year of Xfinity Series under your belt, and he comes in as the champion, which is in itself impressive, but it just needs more time to develop his skills and get comfortable behind a Cup car. Now to JT Doherty Racing. Chris Buescher. It appears that he's the future of JTG Doherty. Him and AJ Allmendinger, the rumor in innuendo has it that they could be out of their deals despite signing contract extensions prior to this season. I think what Buescher has to do, and even Allmendinger, is just don't listen to the noise. Tune out the bad programming. Don't feel like you're racing for your job. Don't feel like you have to perform at the highest level in these next 10 races. Because JTG Doherty, in fairness, there's only so much Buescher can do. Both he and Allmendinger could be replaced. That's a possibility. But his best finish of the season is 5th at both Daytona races. Similar numbers to his first year with JTG Doherty. They can only go up from here. I don't see how they can't. And again, 1 year on the job, 2 years on the job, is that enough of a sample size to say, well, Chris Buescher isn't going to progress or do anything of significance in our cars, let's move on from him? Absolutely not. He did make the playoffs in 16 with that gamble at Pocono for front row. So he has the taste of the playoffs. He's been there. So Buescher, you can build around that. Buescher has the experience. He's won the championship in the Xfinity Series. So Buescher is a great talent, still fairly young. Don't think it's someone you just pull the plug on just yet. Try to, if you're JTG or Doherty, work harder to get these guys better cars. It seemed like they were in positions to win both cars this year at Daytona. And improve. That's how you're going to make your mark, much like Front Row does, the other team that Buescher used to race for. If that's where your strength is in your cars and that you prepare, then try to go for the Daytona wins. Go for the Talladega wins. And ultimately, you are making the playoffs. You win those races. But we don't race at Talladega and Daytona every week. You have to have your program where you can compete on ovals and have an opportunity to not only make the playoffs, but flourish once you're there. And if Ryan Preece or Daniel Hemrick, which is the two names that came up as potential replacements for Buescher and Allmendinger, are you really going to get, and that's not a knock on, or it's no way to disparage Hemrick or Preece. Preece, I think, has a tremendous upside and would be someone that any team in the Cup Series should have a fairly close look at, and I think would be a great driver. It's just, I think you'd be better off sticking with Buescher and Allmendinger as opposed to Hemrick and Preece, whose experience in Cup is not, I think they've only had a handful of races between the two of them, Preece and Hemrick. That's not enough of a sample size to determine whether or not these drivers could replace Chris Buescher and Allmendinger and take JTG Doherty to new heights. Not happening. So AJ Allmendinger, I think his chances really passed him by to attain superstardom at this level. Seen as a road course ringer, or I think he was put a lot in that same situation Marcus Ambrose was put in years ago, where when we're going to the circuit visits Watkins Glen or Sonoma, they're expecting Allmendinger to win, much as Marcus Ambrose was in that same, this is the odds-on favorite. He's taking it. No one else has an opportunity. Well, he hasn't won a race. He's only won one race since 2014. Was it Watkins Glen? You feel like he let the team down earlier this year at Sonoma when he ran into some issues there and couldn't capitalize and take the checkers. I don't think Allmendinger should limit his skills either, thinking that those are the only way he can get into the playoff is by winning at Sonoma, winning at Watkins Glen. He could consider IndyCar return. I know it's at 36. It's not likely. However, if you look back at his Champ Car stats, this is before CART decided to cease operations. Had Allmendinger remain in the open wheel ranks, he could be in that conversation of a Scott Dixon, of a Elio Castroneves, of a Tony Kanaan, Dario Franchitti, Will Power, as one of the all-time greats in open wheel racing. He chose the NASCAR route, which seems to have worked out for him despite a lot of the struggles and trials and tribulations he's gone through in his career, from the Red Bull racing days to Richard Petty Motorsports. When he was suspended, lost his opportunity with Penske, worked his way back by racing for James Finch and then JTG. You have to really tip your cap to Allmendinger. He's still here. Longevity, despite all those trials and tribulations, as we mentioned, still is in the spirit, still in Cup. A lot of the open wheel drivers didn't quite materialize and couldn't make it work, but Allmendinger's still here, and I hope that Allmendinger gets an opportunity to continue his career in 19 with JTG Doherty and into the future. And his best finish is third this year at Daytona in July. So it feels like they have, as I said, the restrictor plate package figured out. They have fast cars at those racetracks. But I think this is to me on JTG Doherty. It's really difficult saying that team name multiple times in a matter of moments. But they have to improve their performance. And I think Allmendinger and Buescher have done their part. They've
worked really well with the equipment they've been given. I think they have to improve their program overall. And that's what they could look forward to in 2019. So now we'll look at Front Row Motorsports. David Reagan and Michael McDowell. Front Row continues to march on while other teams, Furniture Row, have disbanded. Other smaller market teams have BK Racing. Go Fast has gone through some transitioning. They're still around after all these years. The little engine that could, the little team that could, in this case, Front Row Motorsports continues to march on with 2 cars in the series. Reagan and McDowell likely to return for 2019, but as I said, this team always seems to finalize their driver lineup at the back end of the year, once the season's over, or even seems like weeks before Daytona. They don't even have their driver lineup completely finalized. I would expect Reagan to be back, as he's remained quite loyal to Bob Jenkins, the owner of Front Row Motorsports. Reagan has a 6th place finish at Talladega, and that came in the spring. And the rest since then, it's just been another tough year for David Reagan, as he's not really, the numbers haven't really been slightly improved from last year. In 17, he had an average finish of 24.9. This year, through 26 races, he's looking at 22.8. So 5 possessions better in the standings. So you'd look at it, they're quietly having a better season. But every year it just seems to be the same story for David Reagan. Tremendous guy, top-of-the-line talent, just never quite was given an opportunity to make the most of what he had with Roush Fenway when he was there, and had that atrocious season in 2016 with BK. That was a horrible career move, but luckily he was able to return with Front Row and continue his career. But at 33 years old, it's not likely he's on anyone's he's not on a top priority on anyone's list to replace anybody in a quality ride. So it seems like it's all or nothing. He'll continue with Front Row, or he just will not continue in Cup. And the focus should be on getting the cars at Talladega and Daytona, much to the same as JT Doherty. Get the cars, your other program, where your cars are better at other tracks, not just Daytona, Talladega. So there's 3 years since his last top 5. This team is in need of a morale boost. I think even if this coming fall's race at Talladega, they're not in a position for playoffs, a win would do a lot for this team to build momentum, boost team morale, a team in desperate need of some kind of positives. I think that should be their primary focus for the rest of 2018 and in 19, just to try to expand their technical alliances and to get their cars a lot better on race day on tracks that are not Talladega or Daytona. So for McDowell, he finished 9th at the Daytona 500. That's his best finish of 2018. Not much has changed. The more things change for Mr. McDowell, the more things stay the same, and that is no love cliche. Sorry, Brand Van 3000. McDowell, I'm not sure he returns. I think with the names that are out there on the free agent market, the team could move on from him. I could realistically see that. And McDowell, as much to the chagrin of himself or his fans, kind of fits in that same category as Matthew DiBenedetto, Landon Castle. We don't really know how good Michael McDowell could really be. He did substitute for Kyle Busch in one race at Texas and Joe Gibbs. He did run some races for Joe Gibbs in the Xfinity Series, and he won with RCR when he was racing in the car for them last season. However, is it too late for McDowell? I think, has everyone moved on from him? Does anyone even consider him when he became available from Levine Family Racing? And I would have to say the answer is probably no. And if he is replaced, I'm not sure if he continues in Cup, or should he go back down to the Xfinity Series or the Truck Series, find a quality ride there, and prolong his career. But I just don't know if Cup is where we're going to see Michael McDowell in 2019 or even with this team, Front Row Motorsports. And next up, we have Bubba Wallace, Darrell Wallace Jr. Best finish of the season right out of the gate, second at Daytona. Who can forget that in the 500? Really thought he had an opportunity to win that at one point. Was impressed me, I thought, and I've always been a huge fan of Darrell Wallace Jr. I just think his popularity is through the roof. As you know, he's got a very entertaining social media accounts. Just everyone's rooting for Darrell Wallace Jr. to be successful in the Cup Series and to win the Rookie of the Year. It seems like he's going to have to outduel William Byron over these next 10 races to shift himself in a position to overtake him in the standings. More seat time, again, much like Byron. Avoid the wrecks as he pulled a Bananarama. This past has been a really cruel summer for Darrell Wallace Jr. as he's found the outside fence more times than he'd like to. And 3 vicious wrecks this summer. Just the wreck at Pocono was just, wow. Vicious hit. It was just, you're holding your breath there for him. He's not quite out of the Rookie of the Year battle yet. As I said, he should focus on trying to overtake Byron in 18. And then in 19, just figure out how that Richard Petty Motorsports can make their cars better, as they're in alliance with RCR. And we know RCR has not had incredibly fast cars all season. So you have to rise above that and maybe consider a technical alliance with someone else. Hendrick maybe, but I think Bubba Wallace has an opportunity, shown flashes of brilliance all season long, albeit in Richard Petty Motorsports cars that are generally running in the back for most of the time. So I think brighter days are ahead for Bubba Wallace. I think he'll have to just remain patient and bide his time, but I don't think he's completely should be written off the Rookie of the Year title in 2018. I think if he can outrun Byron in those next 10 races, that should be his primary focus. So we'll shift down to Ty Dillon. Once promising star is fading. This team has seemed to regressed considerably, and their focus has to be to get better in 2019. He signed himself to an extension with Geico and Germain Racing, the alliance with his grandfather's team RCR. His confidence has to be crushed. This team, he did score his first top 10 finish of the year, of his career. He had a 6th place at Daytona in July, but 2 years into your career and that's only one top 10 finish, it's deflating. I just don't know if Ty Dillon, what happened along the way, but at one point I thought he was going to have a better career than Austin Dillon in Cup, and it just has not materialized for him. It has just not been an enjoyable career in the Cup Series to this point, and he could be in line for, as I said, as a candidate to replace Ryan Newman in his grandfather's 31 car should Newman move on from the team. But signing the extension with Geico and Germain just wouldn't make. And then they've had I think Geico's really loyal to Germain Racing, as they've been with them seemingly forever. I just couldn't see that coming together in 19 anyhow, and potentially 20 or 21. However, I think it all depends on Caterpillar, and they seem like they're content with remaining with Newman, as I think this season it was brought up, Dillon, to the 31, and Caterpillar, from what you read or hear in the media, that they are having none of it. They wanted Newman as their driver, and despite Ty Dillon, who's quite a number of years younger than Newman and has the potential to be a major star in the sport, Caterpillar nixed that. They did not want to align themselves with Ty Dillon. The numbers are just down. 2017, he was putting together an average finish of 20.7. In 18 through 26 races, 24.5. So he's just regressing. His only second year in the Cup Series, as we said. No top fives at all. Hasn't really. He's been close at Daytona. He'll finish at sixth. It could have easily been a top five finish. But that's the number that stands out to me when you look at Ty Dillon. It's not even the fact that I don't care he hasn't won yet. I wouldn't expect him to win yet. He just hasn't had the quality cars underneath him to win. But the no top fives, that's Casey Mears was running the wheels off that car, and he replaced Casey Mears. Let's not forget that. So Ty Dillon, as I said, hasn't won an Xfinity race even since 2014. So there's no wins in any series. I think is killing his vibe. It's really putting him in a position where his star could fizzle out where it could have once been burning bright. He could benefit from a crew chief change. I think that'd be the third crew chief in 3 years. It just seems like what he was doing with Booty Barker could have carried over. They were building something, and Matt Borland, who's had a lot of success with Ryan Newman and was with Paul Menard most recently at RCR, this isn't clicking. It seems like potentially maybe, even though he is a winning crew chief, Borland's career is set sail, and that Dillon, I don't know, maybe put him with Danny Stockman Jr., crew chief that he's worked with in the past at RCR and Xfinity, and can translate that into some success in the Cup Series at Germain. As I think if this continues to sink the way it's sinking, I can't see Ty Dillon being around much longer and at the Cup level, or even having an opportunity to race for the family business in the future. And finally, Matthew DiBenedetto, the other driver. I know Casey Kane was in the top 30. We didn't really profile him or what's next for him. As you know, his plans, he's not going to be in Cup in 2019, so we're not really going to focus. And he's out of the car at the moment. Get well, Casey Kane, and we're not going to really focus on Casey Kane. And as he is going to finish out his career, maybe he'll gamble and try to win one for Levine Family Racing, go out as a winner. That would be really a neat story, but we'll have to see once he gets back in the car. Matthew DiBenedetto, he's quitting the 32 team, as he said. All the power to him. He believes in his confidence can't be wavered. He believes that he can actually win somewhere else and compete for championships or race wins. It's just not going to be with Go Fast. And these next 10 races for him should just be an audition for 2019. If he can find a way to run him inside the top 20 or just outside of the top 20, that could be a valuable crutch for him for next year, for getting himself into a quality ride that he desires at this time. He's over like Rover with what they said with the fans. They just seem to have taken the liking to DiBenedetto, and they have the twinkle in their eye for him. So this could go either one way for him, the risk or the reward. Time will tell. Either DiBenedetto would attract a team that, like a Stuart Haas Racing, potentially, who knows, Ganassi, I'm not sure. As there's a lot of big names out there on the market, even though that the Cup Series field is a lot smaller than it once was. There's still some quality drivers out there, and unfortunately, DiBenedetto is not Kurt Busch, or he's not Ryan Newman. And I'm rooting for him. I hope he does find a quality ride. I would love to see what he could do, give him the right opportunity, and be placed in a position to win races. However, that is a 50-50 at this point. As I say, with such a thin market and not a lot of seats available, I'm not sure where Matthew DiBenedetto ranks among hot commodities in the free agent market. So that's we're going to wave the checkered flag on this episode, as that was tomorrow. I will be coming at you with a bonus episode of the playoff picture. We're going to go through the 16 drivers in the playoff picture. I'm going to tell you where they finish, much to what I did with the 30 drivers here that are not, the drivers in the top 30 that are not in the playoff picture are going to focus primarily on the 16 drivers in the playoffs and where I think they'll finish and why they will advance and why they will not advance in the next round. And we'll give you a profile of all 16 and how they will run in the playoff as a forecast. I'm not sure how it's all going to play out. We'll have to wait and see at Homestead, Miami. So, this, like I said, we're going to wave the checkered flag on episode number 3. Thank you for listening. And you can find this podcast each and every week on Podbean, Apple iTunes, Spotify, links to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to find the super fantastic above average racing spectacular. And until then, until the next episode, I will see you and take care of yourself.